Dramaturgy with a beefy episode about the Julie Andrews episode of The Muppet Show!
Yay!
Welcome back, everyone. I'm David Levy. Here today we have a full complement of co-hosts, including
Adam Grossworth,
Christy Bauer,
and Michal Richardson.
I have the feeling that we have perhaps misunderstood the question.
I am so embarrassed about this, and I really thank one of our listeners for pointing this out on Twitter. In the Lou Rawls episode, I confused two different turn-of-the-century songs that got their second wins thanks to MGM musicals when discussing Ukulele Lady. The song quoted at the end of Ukulele Lady is not Abba Dabba Honeymoon, but rather Under the Bamboo Tree, which you might remember from the 1944 film Meet Me in St. Louis.
If you like me like I like you, and we like both the same, I like to say this very day, I like to change your name.
The song was originally from 1902 by the African-American vaudeville performers Bob Cole and the Johnson Brothers, who are J. Rosamond Johnson, pianist and singer, and James Weldon Johnson, pianist, guitarist, and lawyer. By the time Cole and the Johnsons teamed up, Cole had already reached great success as a performer, co-writer, and producer of A Trip to Coontown, the 1897 musical, which is considered to be the first musical entirely created and owned by Black showmen. I believe Under the Bamboo Tree originated in Cole and Johnson's vaudeville act, but it was interpolated into the 1902 musical Sally in Our Alley for Irish-American actress Mary Cahill, for whom it became a signature song. So, unlike my defense of Abba Dabba Honeymoon, I have a harder time with the racism of Under the Bamboo Tree. Maybe when performed by its black writers, the song story of a, quote, Zulu from Matabulu who falls in love with, quote, a maid of royal blood, though dusky shade, and courts her in pidgin English is maybe okay, but I think it's significantly less okay when performed by an Irish Broadway star or by Judy Garland and Margaret O'Brien. Anyway, the reference to Under the Bamboo Tree is part of Ukulele Lady as written. It was not a later interpolation by the Muppets, so do with that as you will.
In a much simpler but equally embarrassed correction, in the Elton John episode, I screwed up the lyrics to your song. And while I did so in the process of ragging on Bernie Taupin, I really do love that song, and I did not intentionally make the lyrics worse. I regret the error. First of all, hi, everybody. I missed you last week. I'm excited to hear that episode. We are here this week to talk about Season 2, Episode 17, Julie Andrews. It was produced November 23rd to 25th, 1977. Not really relevant, but hey, that was Thanksgiving, and there was a Kermit balloon in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, which there still is most years, and this was its debut in 1977. According to Muppet Wiki, we don't usually talk about the UK air dates, but according to Muppet Wiki, the episode aired in the UK on December 25th, 1977. This would be a super fast turnaround, and also given the UK tradition of Christmas episodes, I'm wondering if this would have actually aired on Christmas Day, but also with Julie Andrews. So maybe. And I have no great way to fact check that because all of my primary source materials are American. So British listeners, if you've got something on this, let us know. It aired in New York a couple months later on February 20th, 1978. Not a super exciting night of television, but we do have the 4th annual People's Choice Awards. Were we ever so innocent? And the ABC TV movie was called Wild and Woolly. This description is from the ad, which we will put in the show notes. 3 fearless flowers of the Old West turn into the world's most luscious undercover law women and expose a plot to kill the president. If their guns don't get the bad guys, a little lovin' will. And according to the cast list at the bottom of the ad, Jessica Walter is in this. She might be one of the 3 leads, but I actually can't tell. It's like I'm not used to seeing Jessica Walter young. They all have it's that thing, right? They're all in sort of period costumes, but with like incredibly 70s hair. They look like Charlie's Angels. It's a Western, in case you didn't get that. I'm not going to watch it, but
oh my God.
There it is.
I want to watch it yesterday.
Please do and report back.
And I want to option it to turn it into a musical.
We can spread the TV movies around, David. Please watch it and report back.
And please tell us what role Jessica Walter plays. I can only picture her exaggerated wink from Arrested Development when the ad says, if their guns don't get the bad guys, a little love and will. Right? Giant wink.
It's an Archer crossover. She's actually Mallory Archer in the past. All right, introduce the guest star, David, and I'll go look this up while you do that.
To introduce our guest star, that's what I'm here to do. So it really makes me happy to introduce to you
Dame Julie Andrews, DBE, is an English actress, singer, and author. Much like Elton John, I'm going to assume that if you're listening to this podcast, you have at least a passing familiarity with Julie Andrews as that lady from Mary Poppins, The Sound of Music, or maybe even The Princess Diaries. But I didn't read both volumes of her memoirs to skimp on the biographical details here. She was born Julia Elizabeth Wells in October 1935 in the English town of Walton-on-Thames. Her parents divorced and remarried when Julie was still pretty young. Her mother and stepfather performed on the British vaudeville circuit, and by the time she was 10 years old, Julie was performing with them. Although Julie preferred her father and stepmother's home, they all agreed that her mother and stepdad were better situated to nurture her talent, so she ended up in their home and taking on her stepfather's surname of Andrews. In 1948, at age 13, Julie became the youngest solo performer ever to be seen at a Royal Variety performance before King George VI, alongside future Muppet Show guest Danny Kaye. There are clips of this performance on YouTube, which I found pretty spectacular. There's actually an incredible trove of Julie Andrews material on the wonderful, if questionably legal channel, Julie Andrews Archive. We will include a link to it in the show notes. Definitely worth checking out if you want to see pretty much anything Julie Andrews has ever done. Before she turned 15, she was performing on British television and appearing on the West End in pantomimes. In 1954, just before turning 19, she had her first big break in America as the lead in the Broadway production of the British musical The Boyfriend. That may sound familiar to listeners who remember that Twiggy starred in the dreadful movie adaptation. This opened up all sorts of doors for her, including starring in the television musical High Tour opposite Bing Crosby, and most importantly, landing the leading role in the original production of My Fair Lady, for which she was nominated for a Tony Award. While appearing in the show, she made television history, starring in the original version of Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella with Muppet Show guest star Kay Ballard, which was the most watched television broadcast in history at that point. She followed that by launching a recording career that has left a shockingly shallow footprint. Very little of her solo recording work is currently available outside of the Julie Andrews Archive on YouTube, even though she made quite a few albums over several decades. She would also bring My Fair Lady to London. In the late 50s, she became a familiar variety show guest and made a memorable television special with her friend and future Muppet Show guest star Carol Burnett called Julie and Carol at Carnegie Hall. There's an album. That one is still available. It is delightful.
It's so good. Co-sign.
They would periodically reteam for concert specials throughout their lives. In fact, I think we're overdue for another one. I can't believe we didn't get Julie and Carol on Zoom sometime in the last couple of years.
Right?
Oh man, the world needs this.
Right? In 1959, she married her childhood sweetheart, Tony Walton, who at this point was on the brink of launching quite a career of his own in the arts. He would go on to win 3 Tony Awards for Best Scenic Design and an Oscar and an Emmy, each for Best Art Direction. Julie rang in the 60s by returning to Broadway with another musical by the team that wrote My Fair Lady, Camelot, which we talked about on the Zero Mostel episode because he did a number from it on The Muppet Show. In 1962, she would welcome her first daughter, Emma Walton, who would grow up to be a writer and would collaborate with both of her parents on a number of projects, from picture books to a Netflix series. Julie was passed over for the movie version of My Fair Lady by studio head Jack Warner, who thought she wasn't famous enough, but she got the last laugh when Walt Disney cast her as Mary Poppins, the role for which she would win the Oscar and the Golden Globe, the latter of which she dedicated to Jack Warner in her acceptance speech.
So petty. I love it.
It's awesome. Her husband, Tony Walton, would also work on Mary Poppins as costume designer, set designer, and visual consultant, earning him an Oscar nomination too. Hollywood took hold of Julie, and she would be primarily associated with the silver screen for the next 3 decades. She followed Mary Poppins with the film The Americanization of Emily, which established her range. Next came The Sound of Music, and then Hawaii, Torn Curtain, Thoroughly Modern Millie, and Star, which is where her performance of Burlington Birdie from Bo comes from, if you remember that.
How could we forget?
Yeah. At that point, she and Tony Walton divorced, mostly because her career in the movies and his career in the theater kept them apart. They remain good friends and collaborators to this day. She soon began her collaboration with writer-director Blake Edwards with the film Darling Lily. Edwards would eventually also become her second husband. In the 60s, Julie also began starring in occasional specials on television, which would eventually lead to her own variety show in 1972. That show was produced by Lou Grade, producer of The Muppet Show, and a number of her specials involved collaborating with Jim Henson and the Muppets. So it was sort of inevitable that she would end up as a guest star on The Muppet Show when the time came. If I may whine a bit, Julie Andrews did so many appearances with the Muppets, yet they don't get any coverage in her books beyond a mention that they happen to be there. I mean, even her most recent Netflix series, Julie's Green Room from 2017, was a collaboration with the Jim Henson Company. Clearly, she had a good experience and built strong relationships. That didn't merit inclusion in either of her books? I don't get it. Anyway, I feel like I've gone long enough. She would go on to write a number of children's books, Plus, her 2 memoirs do a lot more movies, including SOB, which I watched last week, in which she famously bares her breasts to once again break out of her children's entertainer box. More TV series and specials, including some with the Muppets. She would return to the stage, famously refused a Tony Award nomination when she was the only one nominated from the stage version of Victoria. She would lose her voice, she would regain her voice, and she's still around, still writing and occasionally performing. The Kermit podcast has done really good episodes on her various specials with the Muppets, so if you want to learn more about those, I recommend checking them out. All right, who has Julie Andrews' thoughts and feelings?
I mean, who doesn't?
Yeah.
I heard from friends who studied theater at NYU that the way to not have to do your readings for your history of musical theater class is to watch the early 2000s PBS documentary series, Broadway the American Musical, hosted by Julie Andrews. So whenever I hear the name Julie Andrews, I can't not do my impression of my friend's impression of his friend's impression of the experience of watching that series. So, okay, here's what happens when somebody says Julie Andrews in front of me. I'm Julie Andrews. 40 years ago, I bought a pantsuit, and I'm still wearing it today.
That's pretty good.
Thanks.
I mean, Julie Andrews does have a great voice for narration, which makes the audiobooks of her memoirs extra good if you're into that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, and she's great. She does a voiceover on Bridgerton. It's probably her most recent credit, and she's just perfect, right? She's like, I mean, this is not a rare thing, like, right? But I grew up with Mary Poppins. Sound of Music less so.
I'm one of those people too. I find that Julie Andrews people like fall into either the Sound of Music box or the Mary Poppins box.
I'm a Mary Poppins person.
I feel like for a lot of people it's both, but yeah,
it's not both, but much more Mary Poppins for me.
Yeah, I just and just the sound of her voice is just so calming and soothing. But she can be very funny. She can be very she's an adult human being and an actor who can play lots of roles. And I also love her when she breaks out of that box, as David said. I'm sad I've never gotten to see her live. Like there've been she's done a couple things in New York in my adult-ish theater going lifetime, and I just didn't get to either of them. But she is great. I've never read any of her children's books, but one of them was adapted into a stage musical, The Great American Mousical, which was done at Goodspeed. Shout out yet again to me seeing children's theater at Goodspeed in Connecticut for some reason. It was a delight, and she directed that production. She didn't adapt it for the stage, but then she directed it. And I was in the room with her, did not talk to her, did not see her, but like fully geeked out just about being in her presence because it's Julie fucking Andrews. But that show was a delight. I assume the book is as well. And so I love that she had this other phase of her career. That show didn't really go anywhere. So if anybody listening is a theater producer or licensor, find it. It's delightful. I don't know what happened with it.
Yeah, I had no idea until reading her memoir that her career as a children's book author goes back since before any of us were born. Like she started writing books in the early 70s. So this is not the situation where it's like a famous person has a one-off lark who's like, oh, I'm going to throw my name in a children's book. Like it's the thing that she's pursued seriously in parallel with her stage and screen work, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I didn't realize it either. I always thought that it was, something new to do once she had lost some of her vocal range or wasn't performing as much, but no, it's always been there.
The other thing that really impressed me about her, which I don't think I knew about, is she was very, very involved in the 70s with activism around Vietnam. Not so much anti-war activism, but activism about taking care of the people who were affected by the war and the refugees. She herself has 2 daughters who were adopted from Vietnam. One of the specials that she did with the Muppets was a fundraiser for one of the charities that helped out victims of the war. My general impression of her from her work is not particularly political, so it was really interesting to see that that's actually been a big part of her life, behind the scenes.
Christy, overall impressions.
This really felt like a season 1 episode to me. A pretty good season 1 episode, but like between the jug band number and there being a talk spot and a number that happened at the dance, even if it wasn't an at the dance, it had that sort of familiarity to it. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Julie loves the Muppets and the Muppets love Julie. So like that energy it kind of elevates it. So it's slightly better than just okay. But the only true gripe I have is that I mostly wanted better songs. Like, especially with Julie Andrews, I'm like, oh, we're going to get such good songs, and we'll get into it. We get some okay songs.
David?
Yeah, I was all ready to say, like, oh, this episode was so much fun. I loved it so much. And then Christy started reminding me of all the things that I didn't like in the episode. So, listen, it left a great impression overall, even though, like, oh, this might be my second least favorite Jug Band number after Mississippi Mud. But I love a live animal appearance. What can I say?
Michal?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that this could have used better songs or slightly different pacing, but also, man, it's fucking Julie Andrews. This episode and Julie Andrews just make you feel good all over. I mean, I also thought it might have behooved them to butter us up with a few more cow puns, but I wasn't there.
It's a weird one on the most positive one. Yeah, I to Christy's point, the pacing, like the flow of the episode felt weird, and I'll get into why I felt that a little bit later. I love this episode. I think this is partly a nostalgia thing. I just have a lifelong soft spot and fond memories of this episode, and I got nervous turning it on because of the Elton John experience, but it held up for me. I really do love it. I guess I would just want more Julie Andrews, but yeah, no, I really like it. So let's get into it.
Julie Andrews, 15 seconds to curtain, Miss Andrews.
Thank you. I'll be ready. Just so long as nobody else drops in.
So as we open the show, Julie will be ready as long as nobody else drops in, and naturally, numerous monsters drop onto her from, I guess, the ceiling of her dressing room. That's fine. Gonzo's trumpet during the theme song lights up while the lights around him dim to some mood lighting. Looks very charming. Statler and Waldorf whistle along with the theme song, which makes sense given some of the musical choices. We do, in fact, have some developments to report in our Yay Evolution progression.
It's the Muppet Show with our very special guest star, Miss Julie Andrews!
The Muppets, as we've said, and as are we, are very enthusiastic about Julie Andrews being on the show. So let's also hear Kermit's introduction to Julie Andrews' first number.
Hey, we're very excited around here tonight. Our guest star is a wonderfully talented lady and a good friend of mine. And here she is now, ladies and gentlemen, Miss Julie Andrews!
Yay!
Reminded me of the Ben Vereen in All That Jazz. the talk show, the variety show host.
The film for which Julie Andrews, I think by then ex-husband Tony Walton, won his Oscar.
Why, yes, he did. There's the bit later that we'll talk about where they're chatting. Like, there's just like a hey, it's our guest today is an old friend of mine, like variety show feeling to this that we don't normally get with Kermit and the Guest, even in a season 1 talk spot.
I guess Kermit doesn't have all that many friends.
It's true. And it makes sense for all the reasons David said. It stood out to me as being different, not in a bad way, just notable.
I mean, if your only friend is Julie Andrews, you're doing something right.
It's true.
And they've been friends since she was a fish, so...
Yeah.
Questions. I have questions. I really liked the trumpet bit.
I did too.
It's interesting because when I watched it a second time, I was like, oh, of course you can totally see the lights on the trumpet before they light up, especially in HD. But like the first time I didn't. It's just a neat little, because you're not looking for it. It's just a neat little
it's a nice
bit
surprise.
of technology. Yeah. Good job, 1977 Illusion.
Muppet Show backstage.
Backstage on the show today, we somehow inexplicably have a live cow, and nobody knows quite how it got there or what they're going to do about it, but everybody's trying to figure this out.
It's a real cow, all right. Scooter, refresh my memory. Was there a cow in that opening number?
No.
Then what's a cow doing backstage? That cow right there.
Kermit, that's a cow.
How did it get in here?
I guess he must have sneaked in.
Cows don't sneak. Snakes sneak. I'll find out who it belongs to.
Okay. Who do you belong to?
Scooter!
Okay, Chief, okay.
I think they're going to love this show in Jersey.
It's a show full of frogs and dogs and bears and chickens and things, and they are astonished to see a cow.
I am troubled by Kermit's line, "It's a real cow, all right," which implies that the Muppets are not real.
Well, they're real Muppets. And a Muppet cow would be a real Muppet cow, which is different from a real cow.
I mean, I believe in them.
Bothers me.
I'm troubled by the way that Scooter is written as though he has had a brain injury. I wonder if this was the inspiration for the writers of In Just Like That to approach Miranda in the 21st century.
Wow. Jeez. That was a reach, but okay.
I can hear Scooter referring to it as a comedy concert.
Anyway, Gonzo naturally sees the cow and thinks she is utterly bovine.
You got a great pair of legs. In fact, she's got 2 great pair of legs. Hey, you wouldn't think about going into show business, would you? Well, at least have dinner with me. Promise?
Gonzo!
I hope she does go into show business. She'd make a great hoofer.
Oh, Michal.
Some great comedy shtick.
So everyone's trying to figure out what to do with the cow. They give up on finding out where she came from and at some point just try to get rid of her. The chef offers to take care of her. Kermit finds him with a little paint palette in his hand and painting white lines on the cow, which is apparently the first step in making their barbecue.
It's a butcher's chart. He's deciding how to carve up the cow. This does not feel like how this would work, but
choosing his favorite section.
Yeah.
The Flying Zucchini Brothers, they of the Human Cannonball Act, offered to get rid of the cow by changing their act to a Cow Cannonball Act, though I wish they had called it Cownonball. But that's me. Anyway, at the end of the episode, it all comes together.
I really had a super time on the show.
Oh, good.
Except for one thing.
What's that?
Well, I seem to have lost my cow around here somewhere.
Cow? That was your cow?
What was that?
Nothing. We'll see you next time on the Muppet Show.
Kermit, about my cow, it's quite small.
Yeah,
but lovely brown eyes, big lashes.
Guess they figured out the cow booma booma problem.
It's very cute. It's that like devolves into full chaos under the music. And one of the pigs from Lonely Goat Herd, who was carrying hay, like in Lonely Goat Herd, comes on and is like, "I have the cow's lunch," which is like such a good like reuse of that puppet, which I just thought was really clever. But this is like, I think this is what I meant about like the episode flowing differently, or like Christy said, feeling season 1-ish, like the way the backstage plot doesn't involve Julie Andrews at all. She there's like these 2 talk spots that we'll talk about in a little bit. But then I like that they went out of their way to bring it around at the end, but I would have rather seen her backstage with the cow or whatever, or instead of the cow. I don't know. Good job making it all pay off. But yeah, this is sort of, she felt very separate from all of this until this last moment.
Yeah, I almost wish they had tied it in a little more, like if there had been milkmaids in the opening number, but then also it's a totally random cow that's just there, which
is funny. And also it's funny for Julie to randomly, for like Julie Andrews of all people, to be like, "Have you seen my cow?" Like, that's funny.
Yeah.
I just think it just is why it felt disjointed to me. I don't think having Julie Andrews interact with the cow would solve that, would be better. I think I just wanted more Julie Andrews.
Yeah. Totally incongruous cow is very satisfying. Incongruous? It's very satisfying. It's very satisfying. And we get even more payoff at the end when we see Gonzo and the cow instead of the usual Statler and Waldorf tag at the end of the theme song. So here's Gonzo.
Want to go to a movie or grab a steak?
Also, the cow is in a very flattering straw hat with little flowers on it. She knows she's on a date.
And Gonzo's little eyes, like he seems to realize that he's made a mistake in saying "grab a steak," which is a nice touch.
Yeah, it's a little embarrassed eye flutter. And then at the very, very end, when Zoot looks in his saxophone, there's a cow moo that comes out of it. Nice extra effort.
Yeah.
Good job, Muppet Show.
Well, Michal, I admire how much you managed to milk that bit.
I got no beefs with this episode.
High on a hill was a lonely goat herd. Loud was the voice of the lonely goat herd.
That's where we are.
We make our own fun.
I am entertained by us.
You like this bit, you're going to love Fozzie's comedy concert.
And just like that, we're in the music section. There's a lot of music, as befits having a grande dame of musical theater as a guest star.
She's not in most of it.
Yeah, which is depressing, but
she's in 3 songs. That's
but there's a lot that she's not involved with.
But there are 6 songs in the episode.
Yeah, exactly. So here we go. We start with a Julie Andrews classic.
High on a hill was a lonely goat herd.
Lady, oh, lady, oh, lady, oh.
Loud was the voice of the lonely goat herd.
Lady, oh,
But folks in a town that was quite remote heard.
lady, oh, lady, oh.
Lusty and clear from the goat herd's throat heard.
Lady, oh,
Oh, lady, odelay, ho. Oh, lady, odelay, ho. Lady, odelay, odelay.
It's The Lonely Goat Herd, which is from The Sound of Music, which is a Rodgers and Hammerstein show that was made into a movie, quite famously with Julie Andrews. This song is interesting because it serves slightly different functions in the stage and film versions of The Sound of Music. It's like moved around even in different revivals of the show. In the movie, it's a puppet show. It's a very elaborate puppet show. In the original stage version, it's in the spot where My Favorite Things is, where she's using it to calm the children down after a storm, which
that makes
seems
more
like
sense.
Does it?
Well, it makes more sense than forcing your adult party guests to watch your children perform a puppet show.
I don't know. That just
I
seems
would
like the
leave.
Von Trapp vibe.
I mean, yes, it does, but
You're anti-puppet now?
I'm anti showing up at an adult party and having a bunch of children perform for me unexpectedly. Yes.
Yeah, I also read somewhere that the real Maria Von Trapp threw shade at the yodeling in the movie. That she felt like it was not properly authentic.
Well,
Julie Andrews is very self-conscious about her yodeling. She knew she couldn't do it right. She did the best she could. She goes on at length about it in her book. Which is also interesting because she ended up falling in love with Switzerland and buying a home there and spending much of her later life in Switzerland, which, although not where The Sound of Music takes place, is in the Alps and has a strong tradition of yodeling.
Well, maybe she learned after the movie.
Maybe.
She does okay.
Yeah.
If you ever go down a yodeling rabbit hole, as I'm not saying I ever have, but theoretically, this song has been adopted by professional yodelers, and there's all sorts of fascinating covers of it where real yodelers yodel The Sound of Music.
I went and watched the scene from the movie again, and like it's really the puppetry is really beautiful. It makes no sense, but like it's really like, assuming you're listening to this podcast, you probably are at least somewhat interested in puppetry. The puppets are gorgeous, and I recommend pulling it up on YouTube.
They're by Bill and Cora Baird, who were
that makes sense.
Among the great puppeteers of the early 20th century.
Yeah, I do enjoy how in this version the goat herd is a goat, so he's herding himself, and then he ends up with a pig.
Does it mean he's like a cult leader?
Yeah, right?
And then the duet becomes a trio. So the goat and the pig get together, and then what does one call the bouncing baby? Gigs?
You know,
Potes. I like potes.
I regrettably fell down the rabbit hole of, is that a thing last night?
Well,
I don't necessarily recommend it.
The goats breed?
They must have been crossbred at some point.
I didn't find pigs and goats. I found pigs and sheep, though.
That are scarred.
Basically, it was a pig with like the wool. It's wild looking.
Huh.
I will send you a picture. I don't necessarily recommend doing the Google because it also leads to some sketchy places. But
I mistyped my Google as pigs and sheep bread, and there are adorable little loaves in the shapes of pigs.
Okay, so do they get us back on track? David, in your research, is this a number that she would have done on talk shows, variety shows, or is it, because it feels weird to me? Like I imagine she would have done My Favorite Things or No Re Mi or right?
Yeah, because especially people who knew it from the film are used to like elaborate production, So it's a weird number to do if you don't have puppets, but here she has puppets.
Right. Well, yeah, which is great, which is why I love it. I love it very much. And I love that she, especially like in that clip we just heard, like she is singing so beautifully and so straight and like clearly having a good time, but also like keeping a straight face while, you know, that goat, is that Jerry Nelson? Is just like singing so absurdly. I love it. I love everything about it.
I tried to find some sort of like weird fun fact about the Lonely Goat Herd, and I came across this.
On a hill was a lonely goat herd lay, yodelay, yodeloo. Loud was the voice of the lonely goat herd lay, yodelay, yodeloo. One little girl in a pale pink coat herd. She yodeled back to the lonely goat herd.
Yeah. So this is the Slovenian band Laibach, an industrial band. They did a whole album of Sound of Music covers. And they were the first Western band to play in North Korea, partially because The Sound of Music is one of the only English language films allowed in North Korea. It's used to teach English in North Korea. Isn't that kind of weird, terrifying?
Especially because it's sort of an anti-fascist film.
Right!
It sort of reminds me of the version of Edelweiss that is the theme song to Man in the High Castle, which really bothers me because in the world of the Men in the High Castle, The Sound of Music would not exist and Rodgers and Hammerstein would be dead.
Yeah.
I mean, they would. Like that's
there's a lot not to like about that TV show.
Well, yeah, I stopped watching it after one season, but like also the whole premise of the show, that song would not exist. But yeah, similar vibe.
There's a lot of really great and creative covers of songs from The Sound of Music, so we'll gather a bunch for the show notes.
Like Judy Collins singing Do Re Mi.
For example.
It's true. My only nitpick about this number is at the end, the whole gang is in like a house, and Julie Andrews sits in front of them and like just totally ruins the scale of everything, which is a thing I feel like they're usually very good at, like not breaking that illusion on the show. It's still adorable.
Didn't bother me.
Yeah, I know, it's still adorable. It's just something about it just looked really weird.
She's part of the puppet show.
True. It's a good way to look at it.
Bravo! I love the goat.
He would. The old goat.
We get a Gonzo performance art number.
Do we feel like we have to set this up?
Do we need to?
I don't know. Gonzo's playing the bagpipes. Let's
yeah.
It's like an early ringtone.
Yeah, it's a very famous piece of music. Eine kleine Nachtmusik by Mozart from 1787. Extreme shout out to the public domain. The title was actually sort of a throwaway comment written down by Mozart when he wrote it, which like meant like little serenade. It's rendered literally as a little night music, which ended up being the title of a Stephen Sondheim musical later.
Shout out to Judy Collins.
Yeah, man, the clowns, they're always here.
Don't bother.
Whether we want them or not, they're
already here.
Yep. But apparently, it wasn't like a thing that he'd like done formally. It was just like, oh, here's a cute little thing that I wrote, and like it was just like, oh, here's a little ditty, and like now it's like looked on like, oh, I'm kind of knock music.
My ringtone from 1999.
Yeah, so Gonzo's playing the bagpipes and like flagpole sitting. And the flagpole gets chewed up by a beaver.
A very smug beaver.
Yeah.
Very cute smug beaver, though.
Yeah.
My high school mascot was the Highlander. So
oh no.
Yeah.
Like a Scottish person?
Like a Scottish, yeah. So that meant that there was at least one poor kid a year who had to learn how to play the bagpipes. And
like as punishment?
I mean, it's Indiana. Who knows? I mean, it was definitely punishment for the rest of us because, all these school functions would be like, oh no, the bagpipes are coming out again. But my school newspaper, for which I was the arts and entertainment editor, was the Bagpiper.
You haven't lived until you've been on the sound crew for a folk festival and put away the sound for one session while everybody from the next session is piling in. And it turns out the next session is just a bunch of bagpipers crowding into a tiny room. Like This is Marx Brothers movie gone wrong.
No.
You're trying to coil cables and the sound is just getting louder and louder and louder and more and more
outdoor
dissonant.
Instrument.
Yes, it is. But not at that particular music festival.
Oof.
I recorded it and just called the recording "Holy Shit."
You're made of hardier stuff than I am.
Yeah, so the beaver chews through the pole he's sitting on. He's very cute. Gonzo falls. And then offstage, Kermit apologizes for the beaver getting in. And Gonzo is upset and he says, I just fell 11 feet onto solid concrete. The stage is made of solid concrete?
Gonzo doesn't sound upset necessarily.
Well, but fair. But my point is, the stage is made of solid concrete? That's not right. That's not how you make a stage.
We also get a slightly puzzling Ralph piano bit. So part of that was Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Ralph is playing and the moon starts to rise and he gets distracted and then starts playing wrong and badly. I don't know why he's distracted by the moon being there. It's a weird bit. It's a really weird bit.
And it's just clearly a light cue, which you'd think would be...
Maybe he wasn't expecting the light cue.
I mean, maybe.
Gets them off guard.
Yeah, imagine if you suddenly discovered that you had the power to make the moon rise just by playing piano, you'd be a bit unsettled.
Or maybe the audience laughter throws him off.
But why are they laughing? I don't understand what's funny.
And what's funny is that he's playing the Moonlight Sonata and then suddenly the moon appears.
Sure.
Yeah, so the Moonlight Sonata, that title actually wasn't the original title. It comes from a critic's comment after Beethoven died, actually. It's actually Piano Sonata number 14 in C-sharp minor that he marked quasi una fantasia. It's from 1801. And it's very fun to play. We have a recurring comedy bit in my family involving this piece of music. Because I played this in piano lessons for a very long time in high school, and my brother took piano lessons for a little bit, but wasn't really a pianist. So this piece of music sat on the piano for a long time. And so my brother learned how to play the first 4 measures, 8 measures of this. And he would do this thing where my mom would be at a totally different part of the house. And he'd yell, Mom, come here, quick. And she'd run in and he'd say, I wrote you a song. And he played the first 4 measures of Moonlight Sonata. And it was one of those things that just with repetition got dumber and funnier every time. Years. This went on for years. My mom would run, what? What's going on? I wrote you a song. Do, 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 do. Anyway.
Excellent.
So, speaking of Gonzo, things get sad for Gonzo.
And now the band is playing very slow. And once again, I'll get my coat and go a lonely wallflower, waiting by the wall without the will power to face the music at all. Please, won't somebody dance with me? Start up a romance with me.
Poor Gonzo. It's so sweet. It's not a very good song, but it's sweet.
But then it pays off. Somebody does dance with him.
Yeah.
I found funny if you type the title of the song, which is "Won't Somebody Dance with Me," into YouTube, you will get it. But like the third result is Whitney Houston's "I Want to Dance with Somebody."
Sure.
Which is the same sentiment in a much better song, which I just thought was funny.
And not Gonzo finding a chicken in a sparkling ball gown and twirling with her for like a full minute.
For that, I had to add Muppets to the search term.
So this song is called "Won't Somebody Dance with Me." It was written by Lindsay DePaul in 1973. It won the Ivor Novello Award, which is a British songwriting award, also won by "Don't Go Breaking My Heart." And it made the Irish, UK, and Dutch top 20s. And interestingly, Lindsay DePaul, the first British woman to score an international #1 hit with a song that she'd written. So that's cool. She's an interesting character. I had never heard of her, and I found her fascinating. She dated a bunch of interesting, famous men, including Ringo Starr, Dudley Moore, the potentially fictitious Bernie Taupin, and she lived in a supposedly haunted Gothic house with a 3-legged cat named Tripod. So I want to see that movie.
Yeah.
Is she still around?
No, she died in 2014, sadly. She died of a brain hemorrhage unexpectedly.
Ooh.
It shocked all of her friends because apparently she was a vegetarian and she didn't drink and she took really good care of herself and she just unexpectedly died. Yeah.
And in the original recording of this, it's so weird. It's so like 70s disco. There's a male voice says, "May I have this dance?" or something, and then the like instrumental happens. So like this, the ending of this with Gonzo and the chicken is not actually a Muppet interpretation to give it a happy ending. Even though there's no additional lyrics, it has that happy ending, which is sort of wild, and I love it.
We should also mention that in the Muppet interpretation, it starts with a rendering of the At the Dance theme, and we see a bunch of Muppets dancing, including Kermit and Miss Mousie dancing together while Piggy dances with another pig. Like, Kermit dancing with Miss Mousie is nothing to get worked up about.
Miss Piggy isn't in this episode otherwise, right?
No.
It's, I think, her only appearance.
I was really proud of myself that when the At the Dance music started, I did not fall for the fake out because I recognized that it was a slightly different arrangement of the music.
Ooh, well done. Mm-hmm. I did fall for it, but I'm also, I love when they do this though, so I didn't mind. I think one of the dancers is Wanda in a new wig. And I was happy to see her overly made up face.
Yeah.
And now for something completely different.
Way down south, way down in Borneo, there's a wild man called the Borneo. Way down on Borneo Bay. Even though you've got a corneo, you'll dance till the break of dawn-o. Way down on Borneo Bay. Wild man stand with his clothes all torneo. Toot, toot, toots on his bamboo horneo. Round the bamboo, baby, start to sway. Start to sway.
This song is super racist, right?
It's at least a little racist.
Okay.
It's got to be, yeah. I didn't look up the lyrics to actually, because this is another one like Lonely Goat Herd, where like it does enough of that like weird rhyming for the sake of rhyming that you sort of lose track of it. But yeah, it's from 1928 by Walter Donaldson. It's first recorded by Ben Burney and his Hotel Roosevelt Orchestra. And yeah, this is Lubbock Lou and his Jug Huggers. You know what? I am going to stand up for the Gogolala Jubilee Jug Band. I think they're better. I just do. I like that Louise Gold has something to do, like that gives it a little, vocal variation, but I just find these guys less pleasant.
I definitely will at least give you that they're better puppets. Musically, I'm not sure they're so different. This song was on a couple of different Muppet Show albums that I had as a kid. It was on Muppet Show 2, which I had as a little kid, and then Muppet Hits, which I had in high school. And I think when I say this is my second least favorite Jug Band song, it's probably just that it's the one that I heard the second most after Mississippi Mud. But it also has that similar, like, slightly uncomfortable harmony thing that Mississippi Mud has that I think makes me hate it in the same way.
I don't hate this. I kind of like the dad jokey rhymes, and I'm never gonna go listen to it again, but like, I thought it was kind of fun.
So we looked up the lyrics, and I don't know that the lyrics themselves are necessarily racist because it's talking about dancing to a song in Borneo, but then it references the Wild Man of Borneo, which Adam can tell us about.
Well, it's a little unclear. So the Wild Men of Borneo were a pair of exceptionally strong dwarf brothers who were most famously associated with P.T. Barnum. That's from Wikipedia. So there's that whole thing of, ooh, look at the exotic, quote unquote, humans. So I don't love that. But yeah, I mean, they do reference the Wild Man of Borneo in the song. It doesn't seem great. It's no Mad Dogs and Englishmen, but it doesn't seem great.
Our next Julie Andrews number is a Julie Andrews original.
When you were a tadpole and I was a fish, when the whole world had barely begun.
As far back as that?
I saw you swim by with a smile in your eye, and I loved you from that moment on.
That's a lovely thought.
I love Kermit's reaction because it's very sweet, but at the same time, there is that slight edge to it of she's singing the song to me, and I'm really trying to encourage that.
Well, it's that same variety show cheese that we were talking about earlier. Like, he's heard this song before.
Yeah.
And that's why he has to interject his own opinions while Julie Andrews is trying to sing.
Well, I think it's more that they recognize that the song is boring as fuck, and if their audience includes children, they need to do something to keep them attentive.
Maybe. I don't know. Let's play the intro, which I found very sweet, but again, it's that thing that we were talking about.
Kermit, you've really been busy since I saw you last.
Oh, yeah, we've been doing this show and all that stuff.
Oh, and I love the shows. I watch them every week.
Oh, hey, that's nice. Gee, but, one thing a lot of people don't know about you is that you write children's books.
I really enjoy doing that, too. Mm-hmm.
And you also write songs.
Well, I wrote one for you, remember?
You wrote one for me?
Oh, Kermit, how could you have forgotten?
Oh, I didn't forget. We did it on a special of yours a couple of years ago.
That's right.
Hey, would you do that now?
Oh, I thought you'd never ask.
Actually, I knew she was going to do it.
Ready?
It's so cheesy.
So cheesy.
It's very sweet.
It is.
They have a lot of love for each other.
They do, and it's also it's an acknowledgement of the Muppets showbiz lives outside of the Muppet Show, which I feel like we never really get.
So this is a song for Kermit, also known as When You Were a Tadpole. And as Julie and Kermit mentioned, it was originally written for a 1975 special called My Favorite Things. And Julie wrote it with Hal Shaper, who was a South African songwriter working in London at that time, who wrote for Elvis, Barbra Streisand, David Bowie, and noted Joe Raposo Stan Frank Sinatra. There he is.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah. Phew.
This metaphor does not hold up to scrutiny.
No, not remotely.
Okay, so Julie Andrews is just trying to express her love for Kermit. And her love for Kermit is as pure as the driven snow, and you're just going to question her metaphors.
Yeah.
If Dame Julie Andrews tells me that she personally evolved from a fish, who am I to question?
Well, so that's actually my question. So is that what's happening? Or because, well, I mean, is that what's happening? Because also frogs don't evolve from tadpoles, they just age. So that's the first problem. Well, it's that's a two-part problem because also humans don't evolve from fish. Or is it that they were together when they were young, but now they can't be together because she's now an old fish and he is a frog and therefore no longer lives in the water like a tadpole? The second you think about it, it's what are you talking about?
I think she loves him so much that even in any previous lives she might have had, she loved him then too.
So this is a reference. She did not originate the line "When you were a tadpole and I was a fish."
I thought you were going to say she did not evolve from a fish. I was ready to be angry.
You might have. So it's actually the is it the first line? Yeah, it's the first line of a poem called "Evolution" by a poet named Langdon Smith, who is more famous as a journalist. This is the only poem of his that really had any kind of lasting,
shocking
impact. And the poem comes from 1895-ish. That was when the beginning of it was published. It was published in full in 1906, and then posthumously published and illustrated and annotated in a book called Evolution of Fantasy in 1909. And the poem's not bad. Like the point here is not about like you were literally a tadpole and I was literally a fish, because the rest of the first stanza is, when you were a tadpole and I was a fish in the Paleozoic time, and side by side in the ebbing tide, we sprawled through the ooze and slime, or skittered with many a caudal flip through the depths of the Cambrian fen. My heart was rife with the joy of life, for I loved you even then. So it's the idea of being like a timeless love that traverses the generations in space and time, not literally we evolved from.
Right. Yeah, that makes more sense. Yeah. The problem comes when you start singing it to an actual frog, right? And then it feels very literal. Yeah. I mean, it's very sweet. And, you know, if we weren't
assholes.
Yeah. If we weren't assholes with a podcast, then I would never have thought about it this much. I would have just watched the episode and gone, that's very sweet. But here we are.
I think the song's a little bit of a yawn.
Yeah, but it's a short yawn.
Sure.
Yeah.
It just feels a little more like children's television than most of the Muppet Show does.
Yeah, that's fair.
If they had placed this in the Forest of Despair or one of those settings rather than in the dressing room, and Kermit was snuggling up to Julie Andrews somewhere other than the dressing room, would it make more sense?
That would help, and it would also help if there was live video of a real tadpole swimming around with a real fish that was sort of superimposed over their heads. Wow. Not really. That just feels like a thing they might do.
So we end back on terra firma, Julie Andrews wise.
Whenever I feel afraid, I hold my head erect and whistle a happy tune, so no one will suspect I'm afraid. While shivering in my shoes, I strike a careless pose and whistle a happy tune, and no one ever knows I'm afraid.
She's just trying to get to her comedy concert, guys. Leave her alone.
Yep. So this is a Whistle a Happy Tune from The King and I, another Rodgers and Hammerstein number, this time from 1951. And not one that Julie Andrews is directly associated with, though she has recorded it.
It feels like it's very closely related to My Favorite Things, where when I thought about it, I was sure that I associated the song with her, even though I don't. And then I realized that there's some kind of relationship there.
Look, Rodgers and Hammerstein, top of their game, very good at what they do. They do have certain song types that map directly from one show to the next. And you can be forgiven if you get Climb Every Mountain confused with You'll Never Walk Alone, or I Whistle a Happy Tune with My Favorite Things, etc.
Yeah.
Getting to Know You with Do Re Mi.
Similarly, I think I confused this sketch with the Madeline Kahn I'm Not Afraid of You Monster in the Park sketch.
That makes sense.
Right?
It's a very similar setup.
Yeah, and that sketch started, and I remember feeling like, oh, yeah, I remember this. Oh, wait, this is kind of boring. And then this started, and I was like, oh, because I thought it was this one, which is better.
It looks like it could be an outtake from Muppets Haunted Mansion, doesn't it?
The set is very similar. Also, like...
There's a set, though.
Yes. Also, like, viewed as an adult, like, in 2022, like, very menacing. Like, sort of not that funny to have this young woman walking through the park being harassed.
Yeah, I hope she has something with her besides a happy tune.
I Whistle a Happy Tune and also carry a can of mace.
Right.
Carry a can.
Like, it all works out okay, and I understand, you know, the monsters of the Muppet Show are basically friendly, but, like, it is, like, it gets...
And the punchline is, like, they're not trying to eat her, they're trying to get her autograph.
Yeah. But, like, it gets tense. There's a lot. And, of course, she's such a good actress, right? Like, she actually plays it pretty real.
Well, and she has lived through the experience of being hounded by autograph-seeking fans in a way that felt threatening.
Yeah.
The funny thing to me about this is, on the one hand, this is exactly what the Muppets do best, where they take a song and then, like, overly literalize the lyrics to turn it into something physical. But then, in the late 90s, some of you may remember that there was a extremely misbegotten animated adaptation of The King and I.
Oh, I have watched that recently, and how did that happen on every
level?
But
this is essentially
I saw it in the theater.
I did too. In fact, it's the only time I've gone to the movies where me and the friend I went with were the only people in the theater. But this is basically what they do to this song in that movie, except that they're on a boat, so it's sea monsters. But like they're singing the song as the boat gets like attacked by sea monsters, which is pretty early on in the movie. So it told you exactly what the rest of the thing was going to be. And
well, that number isn't racist, but yeah, it tells you a lot about what the movie's going to be.
Yeah, it's a weird assortment of monsters. There's a handful of mutations, which I feel like has got to be the first time that the mutations have been used explicitly as monsters, right?
I think that's true.
I mean, they've been used in a menacing way before.
Well, I mean, the Sandy Duncan drunken bar fight song.
Say that 5 times fast.
I don't know that they were necessarily menacing, but I think the idea was that the setting was sort of a hangout for no good nicks.
Right. It's weird to see Timmy being so aggressive.
It's weird to see Timmy at all, because this, I think, is the debut of a newly redesigned Timmy, and he looked off to me.
Uncle Deadly shows up. I didn't even notice him until I was editing the GIFs, and I had caught him on one and not realized he was there. I was like, oh, look, it's Uncle Deadly. He just walks by at one point.
I definitely didn't notice him. I did notice the hand pushing up out of the coffin, though. That was very funny.
I missed that.
I didn't.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Towards the end.
Yikes.
Huh.
Well, this sketch made me feel a lot of feelings.
I do feel like it's been a while since we've had a big production number like this. There's a lot of full body Muppets on this. It is fully choreographed by Norman Maine. And, for whatever quibbles I have with it, I found it quite delightful. And also her pink trench coat. We must mention her pink trench coat.
Never mind that jazz. Listen, Turkey.
What? And get out of show business?
For an episode that has a lot of music, we also have a little bit of show business. So let's talk about the Muppet News Flash, which is brief and predictable, yet satisfying.
A plane carrying a load of sports equipment was forced to jettison some of its cargo. Among the items tossed out were 10,000 ping pong balls and 1 bowling ball.
The way he reads that is oh, yes, as he arrives at the bowling ball line, he's like, oh, of course, they wrote a bowling ball in here. I'm going to be hit in the head with a bowling ball. And then he is. That's nice. There is something akin to a talk spot, although it's not in our usual talk spot set. But still, Julie Andrews is hanging out with Kermit. She's been wanting to ask him something, but she keeps getting interrupted by Muppets who are flying back and forth over their heads, and by other Muppets coming on stage to report what's going on. So we're told that Robin got stuck in a tuba, but don't worry, Animal got him out. And then Animal blows on the tuba, presumably, and Robin flies over their heads. And we're told the Flying Zucchini Brothers want to show Kermit their act, and there are Flying Zucchini Brothers coming from both directions. And then we're told that Sweetums and Thog are playing badminton with a chicken.
No, I'm sorry, Julie, you were trying to say...
Sweetums and Thog are playing badminton.
So?
Well, they're playing with my chicken.
Julie, you were asking?
Nothing. I was just wondering what you guys did for entertainment around here.
Nothing much.
At this point, there are a lot of Muppets lined up on stage just watching Chickens and Zucchini Brothers and Robin flying back and forth like they're watching a tennis match. And Fozzie yelling foul is the greatest line of dialogue this week, I'm pretty sure.
I am incredibly creeped out by Gonzo referring to the chicken as my chicken.
I wondered about that too. How many chickens does Gonzo associate with, and does he own them and also date them?
I mean, I think this is wow. We're gonna go there. I think we've established a hierarchy of Muppet animals, right? We've seen Muppy at this point. The chickens don't talk, right?
Except when they do.
What?
Except when they do.
Except when they do, but
act the dance or whatever.
Yes, but primarily Muppet chickens don't talk. So I think that there are pets and farm animals within Muppet World who
and on
are
the bottom rung are real animals like that cow.
Exactly. Who are owned the way we own pets and farm animals. And at this stage, Gonzo is not yet dating a chicken. So I think he has chickens. I think he keeps chickens like one would keep chickens. And maybe they're like his performing chickens, like the Muppaphone.
I don't know, like he was dancing with a chicken in a ball gown not 10 minutes ago.
So we've clocked the moment where Gonzo has realized that he doesn't actually want to own a troop of performing chickens. He wants to go out with them.
Or that's part of his act. It didn't work out with the dancing cheese, so he trained the chicken
or the cow
to dance, and then they built a sketch around it.
Yeah, I don't buy that. I think the chickens have already been established as like higher level. I mean, way back in the first episode when they were part of the choir, but also in order to be able to do things like sing Babyface or deliver one-liners and at the dance, like the chickens are not pets or livestock. They're colleagues. They might be, not your brightest colleagues, but they're colleagues.
Right. But are they part of his troupe? Are they like part of his act? Would it be like my singers, my chorus, my backup singers?
Yeah, one of my chorus.
Really not established.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a stretch. I am stretching here, but
But they said one of my chickens for a reason, and I did wonder about it.
So I have a couple things to say about this that have nothing to do with the chicken.
Oh, thank God.
One is, unlike the season 1 talk spots, there's a really elaborate backdrop. It kind of looks like one of the backdrops in one of the fake operas in Phantom of the Opera.
It does. I think it's the
the ballet from Il Muto.
I think it's the we've seen that backdrop before, right? It's what are those called? In season 1,
the blackout. The blackout.
Yeah, the blackout sketch backdrop. I think it's that.
That sounds right.
But then there's a wall in front of it, so we don't see the whole thing.
I mean, it's also
it's very
not
elaborate.
so different from the park backdrop that Fozzie tells jokes.
Yeah, it's one of those.
Yeah. I'm also here for Julie's gauzy blue shirt under the black vest, even though her clip-on mic is super prominent in a way that they almost never are. Also, I love this bit of stuff flying in the background. It's so basic and so funny.
When Robin goes by, it's just so clear that someone just threw Robin, just threw the puppet.
It reminded me of, I was in a production of Pippin in high school where during the war sequence, we were given rubber hands and arms and feet to throw. And it was... And the thing was, it was funny, but one night there's a baby in Pippin, and we used a baby doll. And one night somebody decided to throw the baby doll, the hands and feet, which was hilarious. But it made
how could you not?
It made our drama teacher so mad. And after the show, he just chewed into the kid who did it. Was just that was in such poor taste, and all the rest of us were and the hands and
have you
feet
seen the show?
Aren't?
Wow.
It was hilarious.
Yeah. No, it works so well.
Tony Walton won one of his 3 Tonys for designing Pippin.
There you go. Well, and just in the whole bit with the way that they all get in sync, including Julie Andrews with their heads moving back and forth, and then she leans on her hand. I was like, oh, I guess I'm not going to talk to Kermit, and just watches. It's all so good. And this is with the cow, right? If the cow is the A plot, Julie and Kermit trying to have a conversation is sort of the B plot, and then they wind up in the dressing room with the clip we already heard. It's very disjointed, but it's also they're just really good together. Jim Henson and Julie Andrews are really great together, and it's fun to watch.
And you're right, this does sort of serve the purpose of the backstage interaction. It just happens to be happening on stage.
Right. Because then it does continue, their conversation before Tadpole is an extension of this, of okay, we're alone now, we can chat.
We can sing about fish.
Yes, we played them out of order, but that's what actually happens.
Shall we talk about Sam?
Yes, please.
All right. So Sam's got a bone to pick with a group that I find surprising, honestly.
Have you met Republicans? Sam is anti-regulation.
Yea, verily, today the very fiber of our industrialization is under attack from a small, subversive group of namby-pamby conservationists. These weirdos would stop the march of progress for the sake of a few insignificant animals.
So this doesn't make sense if you think about it even a little bit, because you'd think that Sam would be in favor of preserving majestic American wildlife species. I mean, I get that they need to build to him finding out that American bald eagles are in need of protection.
Right, but again, but Sam's a Republican. Like Sam is against hippie environmentalists regulating. Well, no, but this is the thing. This is a real thing. Like, he is against hippie environmentalists regulating for the sake of the environment.
I can mostly buy that Sam is against whatever he's against, but this feels like a little bit of a stretch to me. I mean, they might have come up with this line first, so he holds up a list. And do we want to hear it?
I have here a list of the animals these so-called conservationists would have us protect.
So I heard that it was a laugh line, and I figured out from context that this might have been something famous that Joe McCarthy said, but I didn't know about it from before. But it would make sense if it was in the air still in the 70s.
Yeah, if you Google I have here a list, it points to an early Joe McCarthy speech claiming to have a list of communists, which apparently he didn't. He made it up. We knew
what
that.
What was he holding up then?
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, and then of course, the American bald eagle is on the list, and so then he backs down because it's a Sam joke.
Yeah, the list is now inoperative, which I guess expecting Sam or Republicans to make sense
exactly
is asking a lot.
This one hit a little too close to wait, we're still having this argument. I didn't like it, politically speaking. Did not find it funny. But that's not the show's fault. That's reality's fault.
Alas. And finally, a Muppet Labs sketch. Bunsen presents Muppet Labs hair growing tonic, which he tests on Beaker by vigorously massaging some tonic into Beaker's scalp. Beaker's entire head of hair blasts straight up into the air, which also leaves a gaping hole on the top of his head. Bunsen is totally untroubled by this, and he giggles that we should rename it hair raising tonic rather than hair growing tonic, which, sure.
Is the hole visible? I missed that.
I mean, there's steam coming out of the top of his head.
Yeah. I was very aware of the dry, and it's dry ice, I think. So there's they had to have put something in there.
I guess so. Maybe the hole was implied. I felt like I could see it, but
I'm sure you could. I just missed it.
I mean, I could see the edge of his wig as he's having his scalp massaged, which makes sense given that they're about to blast it off his head.
Well, we have reached the end of everything that happens in this episode. Does anyone have final thoughts to wrap us up?
Well, I was going to ask if anybody has a recommendation for a favorite Julie Andrews and Carol Burnett sketch to look up.
I do, actually. A thing to listen to from one of their shows. They did this medley of songs from the 60s that's 15 minutes long that I've been listening to all week that's hilarious. It's definitely on Spotify. It's probably on YouTube.
That's from their Lincoln Center concert, right?
I think so, yeah.
Also, in their first special together, the Carnegie Hall one, before Julie Andrews was ever associated with The Sound of Music, they did a parody of The Sound of Music, which is pretty funny.
We'll put both of those in the show notes.
Excellent.
Lady on no!
Thanks for listening to this episode of Muppeturgy. We'll be back next week with an explosive discussion of the J.P. Morgan episode. That will be funny after you've watched the J.P. Morgan episode. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Muppeturgy or on the web at Muppeturgy.com. Our theme music was composed and performed by Christy Bauer. Our show logo was created by Todd Brian Backus, and this episode was edited by me, David Levy.
How'd it go last week?
It was a little... It's going to be a short episode.
Well, I talk a lot, so...